So there's one thing that I really have lived my life by, and it's caused a huge amount of growth. And it's this tiny little statement of do the thing that scares you most. Now, you'll know what this is when you feel it in your heart. And think about this in business, right? So there was a time in which I was afraid to talk to people. So what was the thing that scared me most that I needed to do? Get on a stage.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we're diving into a topic that I had never really learned about. Heard lots about in passing, but I really wanted to learn and share this super interesting and truly transformative topic. Today we're talking about entrepreneurship and the magic of moon cycles. We're talking about something new, something different, you know, and I want you to, if you're a skeptic, if you're like, hey, this is not the episode for me, I want you to hold on, bear with me, because I found this discussion with our guest super, super interesting. So who is that guest? That guest is Kady Romagnuolo, the dynamic founder of Blue Moon Realty Inc., a boutique real estate brokerage that's been turning the impossible into possible for home buyers and sellers. Kady has a staggering 15 years of experience in the Greater Toronto area. She stands tall as a top performing broker in one of North America's fiercest markets. But that's not all. Kady is not just about sales and property. She's a beacon of support for mental health within the real estate community and has been guiding agents across Canada as a master sales coach. Her accolades include being a multiple best-selling and award-winning author, an international speaker on the world tour of Think and Grow Rich, and a podcast host. And if you've been tuning into the hit TV show Dragon's Den, you might catch her on an upcoming episode there too. Blending brain science with the mystical power of natural moon cycles as a certified NLP, neuro linguistic programming master practitioner, Kady's approach to entrepreneurship is nothing short of revolutionary. It's where logic meets intuition, as evident in her creation, Moon Logic, the first intuitive online portal designed to elevate heart-led businesses from mere passion projects to 6 or even 7-figure empires. So buckle up as we embark on this enlightening journey with Kady Romagnuolo. Let's explore, learn, and be inspired. Hey, Kady, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. We usually like to start out with not necessarily that kind of elevator pitch intro, but more the, a little bit of backstory, help us get to know you. How did you get into this line of work? How did you get here?
I would have never expected to be where I am today and doing business coaching, owning a real estate brokerage, and sort of combining a lot of energetics in business. I was really somebody that struggled with a lot of social anxiety for many, many years in my life and found it pretty difficult even to do one-on-one conversations, let alone, big speaking and training things that I do now. But I had kind of a rock bottom moment that happened in 2017, which really pushed me to do the things that I had been avoiding for quite some time. And it led me into the journey of discovering all these really cool things about myself that I didn't know would be gifts in my business.
See, now that is why we love that question, because there's always a story. Every person has their unique story as to how or why they got here. So do you mind if we dive into that kind of rock bottom moment a little bit and chat about what changed? Because I find it so fascinating when someone makes such a big, life change.
Yeah, absolutely. I ended up writing this story in my book. It's called Home of the Soul in 2019 because it was such a crazy amount of things that happened. I started writing it down, not realizing it would be a book. And at the time, I was a busy real estate agent who was really good at avoiding any type of networking or conferences. And every time something came up, I was the queen of excuses, but they were really just things that were trying to get me to feel more comfortable and avoid having to talk to people. But this particular time, there was a conference for top producers that I just couldn't seem to get out of. It was all expenses paid. The partner that I was working with at the time had 3 nights that we were able to travel for, and everything was taken care of. So I found myself sitting in this conference hall, just not even knowing what to do with myself because I was having a panic attack and sweaty palms. And I really beelined it out of the room just to see if I could get away from how I was feeling, and ended up connecting with some trainers there that were NLP master practitioners. And we really got into, oh my goodness, I was struggling unconsciously with just feeling like I wasn't good enough to do what I was doing. And it was showing up in having a lot of financial loss at the time, despite making good money. I was just sort of leaking it through every area in my life and throwing it away essentially. And just really struggling with having a husband that was also feeling the depression of my emotional states. And it was quite struggling or difficult to figure out why I was struggling at the time. Makes sense now.
Mm. That is super interesting. So, as someone who, also avoids some of those situations at conferences, I have a funny story that goes along with those. Right at the beginning of COVID, I traveled with my husband to San Diego for one of the Brendan Burchard conferences. And I don't know if you've ever been to a Brendan Burchard conference, but they're very huggy. They hug, and I'm not a huggy
Yes.
person. And it was right at the beginning of COVID. And if I think back now, I'm like, oh my goodness, it was like in February of COVID time. So COVID was a thing. I remember people saying, are you still going to travel? And I was so excited to go to this conference that I was like, hey, I'm going. And then it was so huggy. And I think now, oh my goodness, if we knew, if we knew a few months later, all these people hugging from all over the place had flown there, I'm like, oh my goodness, absolute craziness. But because I had gone with my husband, and he is also not a super huggy person, we got to the point where we were predicting when it would be really huggy, and we would like dip out of the conference. And I think back now and I think,
Ooh.
oh, I was like, I should not have gone with him, because he would be like, I think it's coming. Should we go grab a coffee? And it was almost like we played off each other and kept each other in our comfort zone. And we were drinking coffee at the Starbucks and avoiding the huggy part. So that's interesting that you said, you were starting to dive into this. So that your story definitely reminded me of that time. So tell me a little bit more.
Ooh.
You get to working with these NLP practitioners. We actually had someone, I just recorded an episode with an NLP practitioner. So very interesting. This NLP keeps coming up. So now I want to hear a little more.
Ah, yeah. Ooh, I love when synchronicity happens because NLP, which stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, is really the way that we function. It's our neurology, our behaviors, and actions that are responsible for how we show up in the world. And it's all about the subconscious mind. So at the time, I didn't realize that all of my symptoms that were happening and I guess my anxiety symptoms that were occurring were really because I had this deep, deep fear of my peers that I hadn't actually connected to. And my peers, meaning real estate agents at the time and people that were colleagues to me in the industry. And I had grown up in a really difficult neighborhood where there was a lot of gang activity. I went to one of the worst rated high schools in my city. And at one point in time, I actually picked up all my belongings, flew across the country at 19, and basically took myself out of that situation to live on my own and started my life as a teen without having a lot of resources. And I thought I left the physical situation. So therefore, I'm now going to be all set in my adult life. But really, I packed up all of that fear and just struggle that was going on in my past and shoved it down into my subconscious. And then all of a sudden, superimposed it onto my working state, where then I began to get really anxious talking to people because it was triggering this fear response, this flight response that was actually connected to nothing to do with what I was experiencing in the current. And NLP helped me to really flush that out. And I'm now a master practitioner myself in it.
Interesting. That's so it like you said, it's interesting when you start to see these synchronicities between different people, different circles that you're in and whatnot. Because if I go back even maybe a year ago, it was a term I'd never heard, and so now it's digging
Mm.
into some of these different pieces and different people and their passions and whatnot. So you obviously were struggling at that time and worked through some challenges and whatnot. And now fast forward to today, there's now you're offering coaching and guidance and support. And I was checking out some of your content on social media and realizing that there's this discussion of energetics and how it ties in. So how did you get from this struggling to now? What was that transition for you? It almost sounds kind of like a butterfly moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all these micro moments of a big transformation that almost occurred on my journey. And it first started out with my regular communication to myself and that internal part of what was actually going on emotionally. And then I realized, ooh, there's like this big elephant in the room when I actually show up that feels really off. I was really cold at that time in my life. I only wore black. I was really reserved. I thought a person that was really good at negotiating and in sales was somebody that was really, straight and I don't know, it was this warped version of whatever I thought success was. And it turns out that that was all about my energy. People could feel that it was translating into my results, that wasn't my true personality. So, my diving into energetics was all about this natural cycle of how I was shrinking as a person in terms of my skills and abilities when I was triggered by certain things and what I thought I needed to do instead of what really was natural to me and in alignment to me. So learning how to sort of go with the more natural cycles of what we know innately, if we let ourselves really quiet enough to get rid of some of that hustle culture and all the things that it's do this, work, and overwork, then we start to uncover these beautiful, softer areas of who we are. And especially I find as women, we have a natural different flow as to how we operate sometimes. And it's really all about that and just learning who we are and seeing where those natural cycles tend to guide us into different states.
Interesting. So, when you were going through this transition and whatnot, you talk about kind of these numerous micro transformations. Would you say that you were aware of how far you had come, or did you kind of wake up and say, oh my goodness, like I've really, really transformed here? Let's talk about your kind
Mm.
of mindset through that transition. Were you aware of just how far you had progressed and how things were transforming, or was a little bit as part of kind of an unconscious journey?
Yeah, it's funny because it kind of took a lot of that outside support. I had a really good circle of people I had met during my trainings that have become like family to me. And when I first went through the whole training process of NLP and uncovering a lot of that trauma that I was really healing from, my business started to skyrocket. I was able to leave a really toxic team that I was on, and 6 months later, match my income and sort of build myself up from nothing essentially, and people started to really notice. So that was the first moment in which I realized, wow, something is actually different here because I'm going into my favorite restaurant and they're not even recognizing me. They're saying, "Oh, you remind us of somebody that was in here, used to come in a lot, but she was not very nice," is what one person said to me, actually, not realizing it was still me. I had just sort of transformed my personality into a more truer state. And it was moments like that that people started to realize and essentially ask if I could work with them too, is how my coaching work really started out. And it's just sort of flourished every step of the way from there.
Well, that sounds like an incredible journey. And what an interesting conversation for you to be there and someone be talking about you and not realizing it's you. That would be, one of those moments where you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was quite funny. I think old me would have been just hugely offended, right?
Right.
And new me, who had dealt with those feelings of needing to kind of feel important and having that ego state, I just found it hilarious. I was trying to give him nudges and cues like, hey, it's me. And no, it was just, I was a whole new person that was a new regular for him.
Oh, that's very interesting. So when you're working with, you talk about kind of your shift into coaching and helping people along this journey. So what types of people are you working with, and what kind of challenges are you helping them work through? Obviously, each person has their own unique story. So what is the common ground for each of those stories?
Yeah, most definitely. So I work with heart led entrepreneurs, people who really want to make a difference in their work. And that can mean a whole bunch of different things. Passion really is the beginning point. And it starts with that emotional journey of why. And also, what are the things that you really think that you can't do that you would love to do that you never express to anyone? So I help entrepreneurs figure out what is that passion project or that hobby that's on your heart that is actually part of your calling, and bringing into alignment to all the other pieces to really get not only this kind of magical approach to what we do, but a really grounded, logical business plan as well to make those steps forward and figure out how to be a success with what you thought you couldn't.
Interesting. Interesting. When I was checking out the social media, I realized there was also this kind of energetic component that all tied in, and I think it also I noticed there's some connection also to your brokerage name, and that was kind of the moon and the energy and that type of thing. Can you lean in and explain? It's an area I don't know a lot about, but I'm one of those lurkers from the shadows, if you will. Very curious, but I don't understand a lot, but would love to kind of hear you talk more about that, how it ties into this coaching, your brokerage, and your life.
So I teach entrepreneurs how to follow moon phases to navigate life and business. And this is where that natural flow comes into play. And there was a moment in time when I was really struggling that I would find myself standing out at the shoreline to the property that I had. It was in the middle of the forest and we had a waterfront space there. And I would look up at this big, beautiful moon and just pour my heart out, wondering why was I struggling so bad? What was going on? And it was really the only time that I allowed myself to be vulnerable during that really difficult time. And it felt sort of safe in that container of support where nobody was asking me to do something or trying to fix what was going on. I just got to, let my heart out. And we are really fascinated as human beings with the moon. It's this beautiful thing in the sky that we really just kind of like to talk about as in movies and songs, but it's what's responsible for our ocean tides. And it does this gravitational pull on the Earth's surface that causes this influx. And as we are mostly made of water, there's also this interesting connection to how we experience our emotions and our body centers during those times when we have the influxes. So, I've got this really cool system that works incredibly well for entrepreneurs to understand what's likely to occur in these states of sort of higher emotion. It's really those ups and downs, that roller coaster of being an entrepreneur. So I teach sort of a 4-step framework that aligns with where our moon phases are. It's really easy to follow. It's kind of like the bat symbol in the sky. Then you know where the moon is, you know what you're supposed to be following. And it teaches how to take that authentic aligned action. What's going to go on when we might get that imposter syndrome that shows up, and how to handle that and how to move through those challenges and really get to an internal state of feedback that then allows for growth in business and life.
Interesting. Yes, it's so fascinating, and you're right. It is definitely something that is so talked about, but not necessarily, in any real capacity of what it does. More so, just that it's there. It exists. It's an existence
Yeah.
discussion typically. Yes. Okay, so
Yeah.
people are learning and they're working through, like you said, with this NLP piece, they're learning this 4-step framework. And typically, what is the objective people are looking to work towards? They come to you and they say, Kady, I'm looking to get to X. What objectives is a big thing that we chat about here is, keeping the objective in mind when you start a process. So what objectives are people looking to achieve when they start this process? Because I don't know that it's naturally, people don't think, oh, I want to build my business, I need to learn about the moon. So how are
Mhm.
they connecting that? What objectives are they coming to?
So, oftentimes I work with spiritual entrepreneurs who are really in tune with this sort of intuitive state of how to bring flow into their business. And oftentimes it happens when you feel like you need someone because you're in a stuck state. So, either the results are not happening, you've been putting in a lot of work, or there's a business idea, but we can't get it off the ground because it feels really difficult to start. So, it usually starts with an emotional sense that somebody is in overwhelm, that they're having feelings of anxiety, that burnout is going on. And we start in understanding what actually is causing that so we can move through what those blocks are. And sometimes that's really using where the energetic states are and what's showing up. And sometimes it's a really logical approach to say, like, what's being avoided here that your unconscious is really trying to connect with. So it's entrepreneurs that are struggling, and there's usually an emotional piece that goes on.
Interesting. I think also, being you kind of spoke that they need to be in tune with the fact that there's more there. So you're not necessarily working with entrepreneurs that are completely unaware of this aspect. It's more people who understand the aspect and are looking to learn more about it, looking to utilize it more in their business.
Sometimes I often have people that come into, so I have what's called the Magic School, our membership, where we lead
Okay.
people through this process every month. And people are just curious and intrigued, and they see the results and how it makes a difference in not only their business, but their personal life too. So it's really for anybody.
Interesting. Okay. And so now you started the brokerage. How long ago was that?
So I just opened up about 3 months ago. I've been a broker for 15 years, but the launch of the official brokerage just happened. And it's Blue Moon Realty, which really is all about finding that once in a blue moon property. I've got an incredible history of helping people find these just really amazing spaces that they never realized would be possible for them.
Incredible. So you had been doing this previously, but now you've kind of taken everything that you've been building towards all of these different aspects of your business and life and have combined them into, this one piece and such an amazing, almost beautiful niche to help people be finding with these properties and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a long journey here, but it feels really good where I am. I've had some incredible results over the last few years, and it's kind of the last piece clicking into place.
That's incredible. So one of the things you touched on early in the story was this aspect between, your husband and yourself. You were struggling, and therefore, he was almost struggling with the fact that you were struggling. And so I often hear when people go through some of these transformations in their life that some people stick and some people don't, based on when people grow and change and evolve and whatnot. So how has that been, whether it's been with your husband or other people in your business? You mentioned leaving kind of that toxic group that you were doing real estate with at that time. So as you've gone through
Mm.
such a transformation, how has that affected, the relationships in your life with whether it be your partner or business partners, or, it seems to be common that sometimes we run into almost relationship struggles as we transform.
Most definitely. And it's a great point, too, that we really go through these seasons of relationships. We resonate with certain people because of where we were at the time. And not everybody is meant to come with us on our journey because they're meant to go on their own path. And that can be the most difficult part sometimes, is that it feels like we lose people when really it's just opening up space to grow. And so there most definitely were, business relationships and partnerships that did have to transform and sort of move away from. I've still got great, acquaintance level relationships with all those people. There was nothing that was destructive that occurred just walking away from it. But my husband and I are still together. We've been together for 18 years. We've grown together through everything, and really in this amazing space right now where he is a partner to both of my businesses, Moon Logic and Blue Moon Realty, and he's an integral part of the back end, really exploding all of these creative ideas. And we often joke that with Moon Logic, our coaching company, that the magic sort of part or the energetics is the moon, and that's sort of my half of it. And then he's the logic and the grounded and the details guy that integrates everything. And so we've got this sort of symbolism as well between our work.
What a minute, that's amazing. It's a funny story. When I started dating my husband, we worked together, and now we don't work together anymore. And we often get chatting and could spend hours kind of chatting about his work or my work or whatnot. And I would say that I hope that one day in the future that we come back together to working together, because I think we made a great team. Obviously this is a different season, as you said, and whatnot. But I love hearing those stories, because I think the more common story is that don't work with your partner, don't bring your work home and whatnot. But when it works, it can be truly magical and so interesting when you talk about Moon Logic and kind of the two of you coming together.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been fun to experience. Not always easy,
Hmm.
but fun to experience.
You're right, not always easy. I think anytime you're, working and building and taking on new challenges, doing things, trailblazing, if you will, on some of these pieces that aren't as common, whether it's by yourself, with a partner, with a spouse, there's going to be challenges. That's kind of life. Entrepreneurship, we talk about, a lot of freedom with entrepreneurship, and there's some amazing upsides, but there also are some challenges. So, what are some of the challenges, especially as you've worked towards opening your brokerage, that you could share that would, maybe help inspire or teach, our listeners about, working through some of those pieces?
So we go through this initial phase when we really want to do something or grow something in our lives that's really exciting, right? And we can kind of envision all the things. But then when we get into the details of the everyday and the consistency to get something done, that's when a lot of people will stop because it feels challenging or hard. And so, one of the things that is a great resource to do during that time is really looking at what is the one thing that you need to do the most, that you want to do the least, and looking at that as a gift that actually propels you forward. Because those challenges are usually the tiny things that are weighing heavily on us. And so, paperwork and stuff like that, and taking the first thing that feels most difficult to do and literally doing that first is oftentimes what gets us to that next level.
Isn't that interesting? And it is. We all have certain things. Some people love the paperwork aspect. Some people love digging into, what I call the weeds when they're down in the how are we going to make it happen. And the nitty gritty of the operations. And other people prefer to stick on that more visionary level. And then when they have to, dive into the how are we going to actually make it happen. And it's interesting when we combine those. So when you talk about you and your husband working together, does one of you focus more on that kind of visionary aspect and then the other? I think I know based on you talking about him being the more logic side, but I'm interested to know, do you work together on all of these different aspects of the business, or does one of you lean in more on, the operations and the nitty gritty, and one of you focus more on that visionary piece?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's kind of like an intricate dance that tends to, now that we've been doing this for several years together, we sort of know what the other needs to do. And it's more, I would say I'm definitely more of the visionary person that I'll come with this like crazy ideas of all these exciting things I want to do. And he's like, okay, wait a minute. Like how is this going to work? And all the questions. And he'll write things down and sketch things out. And we live in a space called the Enchanted Forest where I do retreats and meditations here regularly. And I had the big vision for it. And then he actually created the space. So created the trails and the lighting and all the infrastructure and everything because he had the mind for the details. So we kind of
Right.
go back and forth on it a little bit. It's usually me saying, I have this big idea, and him saying, okay, let's bring it down and where can we implement?
Yes. I think there's such strength in that. And so, a lot of entrepreneurs, I would say more of the typical entrepreneur is that more visionary type. And, but I think always best combined for ultimate success with that, other side of the personality, the other, attributes in terms of diving in. But I think those, and I would say I often lean more to the more nitty gritty, the details and whatnot. I think it's harder to see the big vision from that side, and that's why I think that when you combine the two and it works, and you have respect for
Mm-hmm.
each other's skills and views, the magic exists there. That's when things like this enchanted forest that you see. That's when they can really come to life, where one person can keep dreaming and seeing the vision and pushing for more based on the vision, and the other person can come in and really lend their skills and help with the execution.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as we try to do everything alone as entrepreneurs, a lot of the time, bringing in those key collaborations, even if they're just touch points on a certain project, right? For getting that help on the details is really key in allowing that support to happen for us too.
Right. So how does that tie into this moon and the phases piece? So are there certain times when you're talking about these different phases? Are there certain times that are better to move ahead with some things? Is there better to lean into the visionary side versus the execution side? How does that tie in?
Yeah, most definitely. So there's four primary moon phases that I teach, and they're about a week at a time that they go every single month. So it's kind of like each month you focus on blocks. And we start off with the new moon phase, which is always about more of that visionary spirit, dreaming and planting seeds type of energy, getting into the passion parts of what you're doing. And then the next week, we always shift into first quarter, which is more about really taking action, getting the list done, doing all those things that you've been putting off so that you can actually gain momentum. The next week is always a full moon phase where it's more of that height of energy where a lot of emotions can come up. We're either celebrating or feeling like everything's not going all right. And that's sort of deciding what do I need to shift and change as we move into then the third quarter phase right after that is where we do adjustments. So we really look at what's worked, what didn't work, what do you need to implement, and where is also self care and slowing down a little bit needed as well. And then we sort of kick it into gear again. And it's this beautiful cycle. If you continue with it and really look at what is good to do during that time and not so great to do during that time, it sets you up for this incredible success.
So based on discussions I've been having this week, so we do a weekly mastermind, and obviously have some really great entrepreneur connections. I'm super curious what phase we're in right now, because I feel like based on the conversations I've had with a variety of people, I have some, like, I'm suspect of what week it is. So what week is it, Kady?
I love this so much because you're what I'll call moon sensitive. I really do feel that people have this innate ability when they get drawn to start a new project or get into the details. It's for a reason. And
Right.
it is right now, it's the new moon phase. And that is the time for visionary and, getting into those collaborative approaches and ideas. So it's absolutely a fantastic time for that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's so funny when you don't really know it, you don't know enough to be knowledgeable or to be skeptical. And when you start to piece things together and you're like, interesting, I am seeing some of these things as we go through discussions and whatnot. If I go back to that time and I chat about, my story about going to the Brendan Bouchard concert or conference, I almost said concert because Brendan does a lot of dancing on stage. That was the
It
other,
is.
it was a bit of a concert. And
Totally
so,
is.
if I go back to that time, and I was so shy. So I came out of corporate myself, and I wasn't shy in the corporate setting. I could definitely carry my way through a boardroom. I wore all black. It was a definite one distinct piece. And as I left that space and came into the online, entrepreneur space, it was just a very different vibe. And I am not someone who enjoyed the networking and whatnot. But it's interesting. I just came back from a family trip, and with my in-laws, and they said, "My goodness, you talk to a lot of people." And I had to laugh because I thought, "Oh, that would never have been a comment someone would have said before." But I've gotten much better at chatting with people and connecting with people and random people in the elevator or this or that. And for me, that comment from my mother-in-law was kind of one of those kind of little bit of a marker in terms of so things have shifted and whatnot. And now I wouldn't leave the conference. I would not plan to skirt out of the conference. It's just different. It's funny how personal growth along a journey can really happen. When I was asking you, were you aware of the transformation as it was occurring? Because I think for myself, I have been less aware, but as things have progressed, now I'm noticing more, hey, that's different, or I feel different about that, or I connect with someone in a different way. And so it's interesting how everyone experiences the journey in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a great reminder of just that idea of cycles, right? We all sort of cycle through the same big overarching themes in our own individual ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if someone had, if they could implement one thing in their business this week and life, I think that what you're talking about really applies to more aspects than just say one part of their business. So if they could implement something and get that win, what would that be?
So there's one thing that I really have lived my life by, and it's caused a huge amount of growth. And it's this tiny little statement of do the thing that scares you most. Now, you'll know what this is when you feel it in your heart. And think about this in business, right? So there was a time in which I was afraid to talk to people. So what was the thing that scared me most that I needed to do? Get on a stage. It's how I became a speaker, not because I truly wanted to be a speaker, but I was so afraid of it that I knew I had to do it. And in doing that, it's just led to so many other things. So every time I start to get into a comfort zone in business or sort of at a threshold of income or anything like that, I always ask myself, like, what is the one thing I need to do that will scare me most to move me past that threshold? And it's a beautiful thing to experience if you can work that muscle memory and allow yourself to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great things happen outside the comfort zone.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
So if someone wants to connect with you, they want to learn more about Moon Logic, they want to learn about the coaching, they want to learn about more about the moon and the phases and how this can affect their life, where's the best place for them to connect with you? Where do you hang out?
So I love to hang out online. Instagram is totally my jam. You can connect with me just my first and last name. It's a doozy. You'll have to look how it is spelled, Kady.Romagnuolo. And you can also go to just coachkady.com, and I've got a ton of info on Moon Logic there too.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kady.
Thank you.